Welcome, everyone. We'll get started shortly, but I'd like to give people a few more moments to get their audio preferences settled and ready for beginning. All right, hello and welcome to today's webinar. Before I hand it off to presenters, I just want to cover a few technical details just in case you haven't joined an ACRO webinar in the past. We use Zoom webinar, which is similar to Zoom meeting, except that your cameras and microphones are disabled by default. To interact with each other and with the presenters, you have two main options. For discussion and general comments, you can use the chat button. This defaults to hosts and panelists, meaning only they can see your message. However, if you want everyone to see it, make sure you hit the everyone button from the drop-down menu. If you have a question, please use the Q&A button. You can ask questions anonymously, and you can view and comment on existing questions. So you can ask questions at any time, and without any further ado, I will hand it off to our presenters today.
Terrific, thank you, Alma. We'll get started now, and I know we have a few people who are still joining. So on our first slide here, I'll share a little preview video so you get some idea about what Nearpeer is and what we're going to talk about today.
This is peer-to-peer, so they're the same age, they're going through the same things. And I think that speaks really powerfully to the tool and what it can offer students. It's less intimidating.
It's exactly like what I was hoping for, like in terms of like opportunities to socialize with other students. I was really scared about that. So I would definitely recommend it to any and every student.
It's amazing. Very seamless, very easy for us. So yeah, it's a great experience overall.
Nearpeer did help relieve some of that stress, just because it's nice knowing that maybe there could be somebody else that is in the same boat as you.
We've been so impressed with the activity of our students and our parents on Nearpeer.
It's about 5 minutes past the top of the hour, so hopefully everybody is in, and we'll get started now. Looks like my screen share went away. Sorry. Bear with me. Great. Right, so we'll introduce ourselves in just a moment here, but I'll give you a little preview on the agenda today with David and I. This is what we'll cover. We'll talk about CSUN, the institution, and their challenges. I'll tell you a little bit about Nearpeer and how it works. And this program that we implemented at CSUN in the fall, we'll talk about that. And some measurable results, tangible results will be key. And the design of the study was a randomized controlled trial. When we hear us say RCT, that's what we'll be talking about. So this is our goal to cover today in the session. And in the big picture, back last May, CSUN selected Nearpeer to help improve enrollment through the admissions process. We launched in just a couple of weeks there last spring, early summer. And we'll talk about the gains that we measured through the study today. A little preview of the data. Everybody's interested in where we're going. 12,000 commits, large school, obviously. And we will started in June of 22. And launched in, again, just a couple of weeks. So I want to talk about that. I know you'll have some questions on that front as well. Okay. With that.
Congratulations on your admission to CSUN.
This is how the program is promoted to the CSUN students. So a quick look here.
Hi, my name is Cheyenne Moshal, and I serve as your Associated Students Student Body President.
I didn't trust you.
Congratulations on your admission to CSUN. Hi, my name is Cheyenne Moshal, and I serve as your Associated Students Student Body President.
And I'm Eden Joshua, your AS Vice President. AS Student Leadership serves as the primary advocate for students of this campus. We're here to represent you.
And this is a special university, and as fellow students, we believe that a special sense of belonging here is incredibly important. And what better way to do that than with Nearpeer? We've devised a new system as fellow students to be able to create a sense of belonging for incoming students, be them local, transfer, or international students.
Nearpeer is an app that will help you connect with your classmates before you come to campus this fall. You'll be able to find people in our community that share the same interests as you, such as travel, music, sports, and TV shows. You'll also be able to join student groups, such as transfer students, orientation groups, and LGBTQIA+, and more.
Welcome to the CSUN community. Now go find your people, and we'll see you this coming August.
Terrific. So a little background there. You see what the students, government leaders think about Nearpeer. You'll hear from us today on this front, and know that the key theme here is that Nearpeer is really kind of different than most of the things people are doing today. So I'd love to answer your questions as they come up. We'll save some time at the end for that as well. But without further ado, let's introduce David. I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role at CSUN, and we'll make this as conversational as possible today. And I'll introduce myself after that.
Yeah. Hey everybody, good to be with you all. I serve as the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Services here at Cal State Northridge. Cal State Northridge is one of 23 campuses in the California State University system. And like many of you, we are looking for ways to connect our students to one another, particularly as they move through the admission process. If you've been around enrollment long enough in higher education, you know there's lots of different tools and approaches and initiatives that make a lot of claims around what they can achieve and what they can help institutions achieve. And we encountered Nearpeer because one of our sister campuses, Fresno State, decided to implement Nearpeer on their campus the prior admissions cycle. And we were interested in their results, but like most data, right, it was looking at and comparing the people that participated in Nearpeer against those that did not, which is always a potential for selection bias in that kind of analysis. And so what you're going to hear today, and what I'm excited about, is that we took a slightly different approach to really try and stress this tool to see if it actually made a difference in the enrollment decisions within our student body that we had admitted for the fall 22 cycle. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you, and I'm going to throw it to Christopher for his introduction.
Terrific. Thank you, David. I too am looking forward to our time together today. My background before Nearpeer, I've been in colleges and universities for about 25 plus years. I served as the president of a couple of small colleges along the way, and I've been a senior leader at some big institutions too, like at Purdue University Global, where I was last before coming to Nearpeer. And why I'm excited to present this data with David today is that I've always been fascinated by those things that make a tangible impact on the lives and experience of students. And I think with Nearpeer, we have a very powerful tool that can be leveraged to enhance that student experience. So looking forward to today. So I'll hand it back to you, David, as we take a peek at CSUN and some of the stats about CSUN and the type of institution that you're one of the key leaders of today. So just tell me when you want me to advance the slides, and I'll be happy to do that. But
thank you, Christopher. So as I mentioned, CSUN is one of 23 campuses in the CSU system. We're one of the larger campuses. What you see here on this slide is the total undergraduate enrollment. We have about another 4,000 graduate students We also have a large international student population. It's about 1,700 students on our campus. We are a Hispanic serving institution, have been for quite some time, and we are one of the largest Pell Award granting institutions. I think we're number 7 in the United States. So we have a very large portfolio of high needs students. And beginning in 2006, we transitioned from a primarily white institution to a predominantly Latinx Hispanic institution. And so that is puts us in a slightly different category than most institutions around the country. You can advance to the next slide, Christopher. So like many of you, CSUN has experienced a significant change in the number of applications that we've received. In its history, what CSUN has attempted to do is control enrollment, meaning we have so many more students than we had spots. But we also had a commitment to access. And so we really tried to steer away from increasing our academic requirements for entry to control enrollment, and instead use some other strategies to try and control our enrollment relative to the number of people. But that has changed. And you can see, really, if I showed you 2018, that the 2018 application is moving down. You can see how we're seeing a step down and this is for both our first-time freshmen and first-time transfer. We were able to admit more students despite a drop in applications, but that now is at an end. And so we really can't make any more changes to our admission criteria. And so we're really set in this context, like all of you, looking at a declining demographic, obviously nationally, but we're a regional institution. And so our largest school district is LAUSD, and it is predicted to decline 14% over the next 10 years. And then, in the state of California in general, we're seeing declines across the entire pool of students who qualify for admission as first-time freshmen or first-time transfers. Couple other things that are happening is our University of California system is increasing its desire to enroll more students. So within the next 5 years, they have a goal of enrolling 33,000 more students in their system than today, basically another UC campus. Another thing that's happening in the state of California is we have more people immigrating and migrating out of California than immigrating into California. This is now the second year in a row in which we've had more people leave than live in California. And that, in combination with the demographic changes, and then of course the piece related to the perception of the value of education eroding, not only in California, but across the country. All these pieces really contribute to a very different landscape than CSUN has encountered before. And while we're in this context, a couple things continue to persist. One, we struggle with equity gaps between our majority population students, or students who are well served, versus those who are underserved in our surrounding areas. And so graduation rates and persistence rates are different among those populations. And then also, as with all of our populations, but even more so with our Black students and APTA students, we're seeing significant declines. All right, you can go to the next slide. So 2 years ago now, almost 2 years ago, we welcomed a new president, Dr. Erica Beck, and she engaged in a 100-day listening tour, and one of several themes emerged, but the one that we're going to talk about today is this sense of belonging. And this is not a new concept. I mean, Strayhorn back in 2012 sort of introduced this phrase of sense of belonging to higher education. There are other folks that had talked about it in different settings. Some of you may have heard of psychological well-being, and those are all related concepts in terms of sense of belonging. And clearly for us, as our campus transitioned from a primarily white institution or predominantly white institution to one that's that has a majority population Hispanic. We are a very diverse community, mostly commuter students, a very small residential and so community, and so therefore being able to connect to one another can be a challenge, especially when you also highlight the fact that so many of our students are Pell eligible. So they are having to work sometimes full time. And so all of these components contribute to a sense of disconnection for many of our students, and being able to find a way at the point of admission and then that allows them to connect to one another and create a sense of belonging was something that we're very interested in exploring.
That's terrific. Thank you, Dave. And that, you're talking about the students and this need for belonging overall. As you know, it's a very popular term today, managing belonging on campus and the importance of it. But the concept's been around a long time, and even all the way back to Abraham Maslow. Belonging is in the Maslow hierarchy. Sometimes we forget that. And it's so central to students, but it's a real human need, and I think that's what we're trying to address here. From an academic perspective, David, what's your broader feeling about the importance of belonging as it relates to student behavior and success?
Well, I think that what the research shows, and I don't know, some of you may have read the article in the Chronicle of Higher Education maybe last week, talking about sense of belonging, and that it is a ubiquitous phrase, but we don't entirely know how to define it and what it means in the college setting. I think some of the things that people have talked about is students need to see themselves right on campus in terms of how people look, but also in terms of their interests and things that might motivate them to engage more deeply. And I think one of the pieces that is hugely important in sense of belonging is this idea of not just that I see myself, not just that I'm a meaningful part of the community, but that I can make a contribution, that I feel like I can make a contribution to that community. And that binding is in order for me to contribute in a meaningful way, it means that I have to understand and be this community and be invited into it in ways that allow me to express myself and express my gifts with that community at large. So, and when students experience that kind of connection with one another, they are then, that's sort of that as Tinto says, that sort of binding glue that allows them to weather things that might go awry during their college journey, but because they have this connection, this sense of belonging with the community, it allows them to navigate and traverse those struggles and come out the other side with a degree.
Terrific. Yeah, I was having the same conversation with Dustin Minocha recently, and he shared these comments on another ACRO event, on the ACRO podcast, on the Admitted podcast, which many of you, I'm sure, listened to. And I thought this was very insightful and sort of striking on what it really means to have sense of belonging. It's an emotional experience, because humans are emotional beings, and that is really at the heart of belonging and how we can thrive. And I think all of this is key, because what we're trying to address is that belonging to get those outcomes that we're going to look at a little bit more closely now. In the broader macro environment, I think we should talk about those things that are happening for all of you, not just at CSUN, but everywhere. This idea of students wanting to know, will I fit in? Am I so unique there'll be nobody else like me, is a very real issue. It's the number one concern that students have going into a university setting. And we know about the mental health focus today. It's terrific that the Surgeon General is putting a lot of emphasis on this area, particularly in this past few weeks. A lot of been reading about the impact on adolescent girls specifically, but it's really again a people problem with isolation and loneliness that's happening for students everywhere. And college presidents are concerned about that, and we hope that this intervention is something that you'll talk about with your president and your president's cabinets along the way. Retention rates are struggling overall, and graduation rates are going down. We're seeing this from the clearinghouse. So a lot of things are pointing in this one direction, and this is one major intervention that we're trying to have. I'll take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about Nearpeer, then we'll get to the study that we did together, so you can hear some context. Again, with Nearpeer, our goal, this is why we exist, is to increase a sense of belonging and a connection to the community. It's important to have connections between staff and peer mentors and faculty to students, but the connection that those students have with one another is really a central concept that we're trying to address. So we help to build peer engagement. Sometimes people think this looks like a social platform. It's really a peer engagement platform. And we meet the students where they are on their devices, typically. But our similarity to social media sort of stops there, right? The goal here is to find real friendship, real connections with people with whom you share a lot in common. And we're going to see that. We'll talk a little bit about how we're different, but I like to share that it's not just me saying that, it's really the industry is seeing it, and we're seeing from EduVentures to the Christensen Institute. People recognize the difference in what Nearpeer is doing overall. So the key takeaway is, on social platforms, people follow others. They don't necessarily connect. They watch what other people are doing. They may weigh in if they're extroverted, or if they're connected to people that they already know, then it's a channel for communication. But it's a very difficult channel to make new connections, and that's what we're trying to address here. Okay, Dave and I wouldn't be here if the students didn't enjoy this experience and see that it's meeting a need for them. So we'll hear from students a little bit later on in a little short video, but students really get this. They want this, and they say, okay, this is cool. So promotion is easy. If you tell the students it's here, they'll join. They'll join Nearpeer and check it out and make the connections that they need. We're going to see a lot of data today, so we thought let's share a little bit about Nearpeer as it relates to the student experience. So we saw some quotes from students, but let's hear from students. These are students from Fresno State. We've been working with Fresno State for some time now, so we have a few more videos from them, but let's take a listen.
One of my favorite things about Nearpeer is groups, and a lot of people can just join a group. I've seen a lot of groups that are titled like Taylor Swift, a group that, all the Swifties want to join, or boba. I've been in one where it's healthy minds, just about like our well-being. So I've loved those because we can just connect with people that have similar interests as us.
I would not have found a roommate if it wasn't thanks to Nearpeer. Nearpeer was essential for me finding a roommate out here in Fresno, especially since I'm coming a long way. Through Nearpeer, I was able to meet Alex, and I'm ever blessed for that. And something else is that through Nearpeer, I was also to meet other musicians, since I also like partake in making music.
And it helped me shape some relationships too, with like make more friends too as well. Because I usually randomly went to like some group chats about like sports, because I'm interested in like soccer and stuff like that. And I made more friends.
We got the email saying, oh, you can meet people, make friends. And then something that caught my eye was that there's a section especially for your major. So that's where I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. Then I get to meet people who's going into the same field as me. I do like to study like in groups. I feel like it's better for me. I don't think I can focus studying by myself. In my profile, I actually have that I'm looking for a roommate, and I've talked to a couple girls too. And I'm pretty sure that if we end up being roommates, that we'll probably just like carpool.
I would say that I was definitely nervous and scared just because it was going to be a completely new like environment. And I think the app definitely had an impact on my transferring process because it did make it easier. Sometimes it's harder to start friendships in person. So I feel like Nearpeer can be like that. It can be like that, like the first step into like starting new friendships.
I'm from basically from India. It was like a new change of country for me, so I was a bit concerned. The app basically helps you to get out of that awkward phase, which everyone have at their first day of college.
If you're interested in downloading Nearpeer, I would recommend it. It personally has helped me be a lot calmer about going into Fresno State. I had a couple of friends, but they're not in the same major as me. So I was kind of, freaking out, like, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to. But it definitely helped me. And now I have a friend that I talk to every day.
This is the first social media that I have that is exclusively people I don't know and people that I would like to get to know. I have 2 kids, so there's like a group for people that also are going to Fresno State with kids. And I think it's really scary to go to a really big school. So it's nice, even if I were to meet one person on the app, it's nice to know that I'm not going to a big, scary place full of people I don't know. There's people that I'm going to recognize.
All right, so we'll dive in and hear some more about this. We talked about how Nearpeer is trying to help students get that sense of belonging. It's so important for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We'll see some results focus around that today too, and the connection with mental health. Overall, it's a point of stress for institutions, it's stress for students. And if we can do more things that help divert people from having to need more intense intervention, just by connecting them with people is really essential for us too. So with that, how does it work? Just quickly, we don't have time for a real demo today to see this, but in Nearpeer, students create a profile with all of their interests, life experiences, affiliations, and affinities. There's over 2,000 different things that they can choose to help paint the picture of themselves, to have that mosaic of who that person is. Sometimes when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, we think so unidimensionally that someone is a person of a specific ethnicity or gender identification. Really, people are mosaics of so many different variables, and in Nearpeer, typical students share 20 or 30 of those variables in here. One of our key goals, get the introverted folks off of the sideline, and we do that because there's an implicit permission to connect within Nearpeer. This is very powerful. It's also an ad-free platform, and the data is secure, which we know is important to all of you, but it's also very important to students today. Okay. This is what a profile can look like. This is Sean Daniel. He was a student at University of Southern Maine, and he also worked as an intern at Nearpeer, and he's happy with us sharing his profile here. But you see a pretty rich set of inputs that he shares about himself, and then specific interests that he's chosen from the list, and they're pretty specific and all over the map. And you see some of those things that are highlighted that are in purple, and these are his passions. These are his top interests. These are the things that are very important to him, or interests that he has. So our algorithms in the background then match a student with profiles of other people to show them who are the people with whom they share the most in common. That is how Nearpeer works behind the scenes. That's our algorithms and AI in the background. So as you can see here, with this matching algorithm, if I were in Nearpeer or another student were in Nearpeer, they would see that, hey, Jean Daniel is in the same Promise Scholars group and has interest in artificial intelligence and French and one other thing. So I can click through and see what that is, and then we can start a one-to-one chat if we like. Separate from today's call, we have an impact of belonging report that we can put a link to or send you a link after this session today. But we're seeing the impact of, across a variety of school types, and with that, David, I know that before coming to CSUN, you've been with other institutions too, and I'm curious about your thoughts on the applicability to Nearpeer to the students at a giant public university. What do you think about Nearpeer for smaller private institutions? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background and thoughts there.
Sure. Before I came to CSUN, I served as the vice president for enrollment management at Azusa Pacific University, which is a small faith-based institution in Southern California, about 10,000 students or so. And I think this kind of interaction would certainly be beneficial to a student applying to APU or to any small campus, in part because the same challenges and fears that the students that you heard earlier are present in students that are applying to these private universities. And in fact, sometimes it's even more intense, because even though you have a group of students that are coming from the local area, more students at private institutions tend to come from outside the immediate region where that university resides, particularly if it's a rural campus. And so being able to connect to students because they're coming from different places, I think would be a real benefit to colleges that recruit nationally, or even if it's a regional university, but they're recruiting outside that region. That's another great example of how this kind of technology could connect students together.
Interesting. That's very helpful. When we first met and talked about possibly bringing Nearpeer to CSUN, you decided that you'd like to approach this in a certain way. You said that at the top at the introduction. So maybe you can talk about some of your goals with Nearpeer going in.
Sure. Well, I think intuitively, Nearpeer's approach made sense to me, to us as an institution, being able to provide a way for students to connect with one another in a sort of non-intimidating way, particularly for those that are maybe not extroverts, made some sense. And as I mentioned before, there were some compelling pieces of data that suggested if you participated on the platform, that you would be more likely to enroll. But one of the things that we're also worried about as well, if you decide you want to participate, you might be one of those students that was already interested in your institution, and so the participation Nearpeer really more is a predictor of your intention as opposed to a driver or an influencer of decision making. And so in order to understand its actual impact on the decision making of our students as they contemplated coming to CSUN, because we invited those that had what you guys call deposits, we call intents, but for those that had submitted an intent, that 12,000, we split them into two. And because we wanted to understand whether the control group and the treatment group acted in the same way, irrespective of whether they were invited to Nearpeer or not, relative to all the different pieces that were in that previous slide, right? Enrollment rate, and then if we disaggregate those data by ethnicity, and first-time transfers, first-time freshmen, EFC, first generation, all those pieces, we really wanted to understand, is there an actual difference? And the only way that we believe that we could do that is to divide them in separately, randomly assign them to a treatment and control group, and then see if there were differences by the whole group, meaning whether or not you participated in Nearpeer, does that group behave differently than the other group? Much more conservative approach, but I think it would then help us isolate whether there was a real significant influence that Nearpeer had on the decision-making process of our students. And then the second, we've used Mentor Collective in the process of inviting students to through the summer to connect with a peer mentor as a way of improving yield. And what we didn't want to do is to cannibalize that tool by using Nearpeer. So we also wanted to understand if we engaged in this process by inviting students to the Nearpeer platform, what impact would it have on Mentor Collective participation? And obviously, if it was lower, then we would, then in previous years, then we would potentially assume that, okay, this is because of the influence of Nearpeer, versus if it increased participation or it was neutral, then we'd be comfortable thinking that Nearpeer really didn't have a deleterious impact on Nearpeer, on Mentor Collective participation rates. All right, you can go to the next slide.
Great. Yeah, I think I'll just comment on that. I think everything that we do in admissions and enrollment management, there are so many variables, so many different things that and interventions that we want to try, and then sort of the attribution of impact is often hard to decipher. So I thought this randomized controlled trial was fascinating because essentially the students are the same in both groups, right? They've been randomly assigned to that overall, and giving us two groups of 6,000 students is how we approach that. The first milestone that we wanted to track these students was for summer melt, right? So you track those for what is the show rate, what's the melt rate, the difference between these two groups, and if there is a difference, what is the statistical significance, and is it airtight? Is it not due to something else that's in the mix? So anything else you want to say about the design here, David?
Yeah, I think in social sciences, this randomized control or experimental design, others will describe it that way, is really the gold standard in determining correlation. It's still no cause and effect because there's just too many variables that can influence any particular decision, but this is about as good as we can make it because now we've got two groups that look exactly the same, but one is invited to Nearpeer and one is not. They get everything else, but they don't get the Nearpeer invitation. And so it allows us to make a stronger case that there is a relationship between participation in Nearpeer and the decisions that students make, versus if we simply used a regression and looked at the differences between those that only participated in the platform versus those that did not.
Terrific. And I think you did a really good job of keeping it sequestered. So there were no students in that control group that actually joined Nearpeer, and you controlled the fact that they didn't even know it existed by only directing communications to those students that were randomly assigned to the Nearpeer group. It was also a little contrived because usually we would like to present Nearpeer at orientation, for example, but everybody comes to orientation. You can't tell the students that, hey, this is only for some of you at this moment. So, I think I just want to thank CSUN for taking this initiative to do this, because it is a different approach that gives us this really solid evidence. So this was how the students learned about it. You saw the student government leaders video. They would get that email, they can click on it, they could see it here. And that was what drove the initial adoption. So I'll let you comment on these, and I can fill in the blanks. Whoops, I think that 1560 of the Nearpeer group, that was about 25% of all the invited students adopted, David. I don't know about you, but I was thrilled with that, considering that we didn't promote it aggressively because of the RCT design.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one piece that Christopher has alluded to a couple of times, is that the participation of our students was really dampened by this structure that we were using to try and study. But even with that, even with those limitations, we saw a significant engagement by the treatment group early on in the process, and they, as you can see, they on average made 15 peer connections, and then lots of different conversations. And the thing that I was impressed by, that I think alleviated some of my concern, is that unlike social media and social media platforms, students are just connecting through text with one another. They can't share video, they can't do these other things, and it's not anonymous. They have to represent themselves as who they are, and in both of those pieces, I think, contribute to creating a very safe place where you don't have bad behavior happening. In fact, I think in our context, we had no issues with students reporting abuse between, based on their interaction with another student. And so it really did facilitate healthy connection, fun connection with our student body that were invited to the platform in ways that I think really benefited. And you'll see, some of those data here in a second.
Great. And so some of the more of the total engagement here, the students, this is not like social media where we want students in here 40 times a day, but over the 3 months from launch until the study ended at Census Day in the fall, the average student came back to Nearpeer 40 times and spent 5.6 hours in the application, either in the app on the phone, or it's fully ADA accessible on the web as well. About 90% of the students access it with their mobile device. But can you imagine, nearly 9,000 hours of interaction between the incoming class? We spend a lot of effort on places like orientation to bring people together, and hopefully people can connect with a couple of others. But almost 9,000 hours of interaction we find is phenomenal, because the only thing to do in Nearpeer is interact with people you share a lot in common with. So fairly unique that way. The average student put in 20 interests, as I mentioned earlier. Here are the top 20 interests. This is at CSUN. Every school is a little bit different. These are the top 20 from the student body, incoming student body at CSUN last year. So you see some things that are maybe surprising, some that were expected, but every school is a little different. It's really fascinating for us to watch that as well. So David, when we presented together in Toronto, I gave you this little quiz. Let's see if you remember the answers to these questions, because I put you on the spot then. I guess I'm putting you on the spot again. At CSUN, do you remember what the favorite TV show was of the CSUN students?
I believe it was Stranger Things.
Oh, well done. Nicely done. And how about the musical artist?
My favorite, Bad Bunny.
You're 2 for 2. Nicely done. And fast food, what's the favorite fast food at CSUN?
In-N-Out.
In-N-Out burger. There we go. All right. And a favorite video game, kind of a surprise here, was
Minecraft.
So this gives us insights onto this particular group of students, but it also is actionable for programming, it's actionable for marketing, to know all that information about students that they place in their profile. So here are some of the actual student profiles from CSUN. You can take a peek here about what people are saying. It's for all types of students, married with 7 kids, to someone who says, hey, I like to meet new people, people who traditional age, non-traditional age, transfers, international, and giving them a place to interact with one another in a group chat. This can be a group chat, in this example, just for transfer students. So other transfer students find their people here. David, your CSUN is about 50% of the incoming class was transfer students. Is that right? How do you think this meets the needs for the transfer students from your perspective?
Well, I think the transfer students are unique in that they are typically older, and they are working adults primarily. And by adult, it could be anywhere from 23 years old to 40 years old. I mean, it's a large range, but in our context is between 23 and 30. So they don't have time to connect with other people on their campuses. Our community colleges are not residential in any way, absolutely 100% commuter. Often their courses are online. And so being able to connect to somebody is incredibly difficult for them. So, and they really have no way of doing that. Even when they come to CSUN, I mean, they are already distributed to their colleges, as opposed to our first-time freshmen, where we've got a couple different ways that we interact with them as a cohort, whether it's advising or other kinds of support systems or events. Transfer students just don't have that same opportunity. And so to have this platform where they can find each other and being able to say, for example, hey, I went to Pierce College, and well, so did I, and I'm also majoring in biology. And so that immediately connects them. And then if they have these other interests, whether they have children or musical interests, all of those things, I think, start to contribute to them finding their people in an accessible way prior to stepping on campus. And one of the things that we found when we did our summer yield event, many of the students that attended had already connected on the Nearpeer platform and encouraging each other to go to the event so they could meet one another, and even say, hey, I'm interested in finding a place to live. Do you want to, or living opportunities together? All of those things, I think, really make a difference for our transfer students.
Excellent. So let's take a look at the data a little bit here, and tracking students after Census Day. This intent to treat design, as you know, David, is once people are in either the control group or the Nearpeer group, you measure the outcomes for the whole group. So even though only 25% of the students here were Nearpeer adopters, we measure the entire group Nearpeer. So anytime we see data here today, that's the approach. I think you said earlier, this is, is it more substantial than this, or do you think this is about accurate of the probable impact of Nearpeer on the students?
Well, I think it is dampened by some of the factors that you mentioned earlier. One, we didn't communicate the opportunity early, so we were late to this process. Second, it only went to a portion of our students, and we couldn't utilize some of the other components of communication tactics that we would normally have available to us to really expand the awareness of our students about this platform. And in the way that we're looking at this, one of the things that this study shows is that we're not just seeing students that would already have selected it, right? But we're seeing the bounce is because they're students that were on the bubble, and when they participated in Nearpeer, it did positively influence their decision to attend. Now you might say, well, this is a pretty small percentage. It's true, but it's on a large population. And so, we're talking about, as you can see here, 220 plus students for us. And I think it would be larger if all of these other factors were no longer in play. And if we had notified them and made them aware of the platform earlier on in the admissions cycle.
Terrific. All right. So, basically the design here too is we're tracking the students in this group, not just today, but going forward. And we put a couple of milestones here. We started that group. Here are all the commits that came in. We're trying to address MELT out of the gate. And then so the next milestone is, to start in the fall. So the census date. So this first set of data is around that movement. Of all those who committed, what percentage of those started, and what was the difference between the two groups? There's an adage in this type of research. It says once randomized, always analyze. So even if people drop out, we still keep them in this group to know their disposition as they move through towards graduation. So here's some of the data. 2.2% higher for all students, but there's some significant impact, and we're calling out these three subgroups. I think you talked a little bit about why they're a priority at CSUN, but what did you think when you saw these results, particularly as it relates to these underserved and underrepresented populations?
Yeah, I would say, so let's put this in context, because I think you guys, if I'm sitting in your chair, you're wondering about, well, what about first-time freshmen, right? And so what this study showed, there wasn't a significant difference in terms of the total first-time freshman number relative to the two control groups. But what we did see is this increase in transfer student enrollment. And I think in addition to that, these two other groups, Black students and first generation, as well as our male students, and all of these groups are groups that, at least for CSUN, we have historically seen challenges in enrolling them in the fall semester. So to be able to see a significant enrollment bump in these groups means that creating a space in which these students can see one another, connect with one another, really does influence their understanding and their desire to want to be at CSUN. And what will be interesting is whether that connection that they make during the summer, in this case, that the influence persists and creates enough sense of belonging for them and interconnectedness that it allows them to continue to, we continue to see those differences in enrollment as they move through their journey at CSUN.
Terrific. All right, then we continue. This is the update to the data, and I'll quickly go through this. We're just getting some of this data coming in now. So did those students who were from the original commit pool, some left and didn't show up, those that showed up, who's still here from that original cohort in spring of 23? So term 1 to term 2 retention, and then we'll continue the longitudinal study with who comes back in the fall of 23 as the sophomores. So here's what we saw here with transfer students. You see the actual data on the right. The Nearpeer group, 80.5% of those students are still enrolled from the original commit pool, and the control group had 77.5%. So 3.9% difference between the groups in enrollment overall, and a 3 percentage point difference between the two groups. And just quickly, the Black students, 12.1% at this point. So 72 versus 64% of that group is still there in the Nearpeer versus the control groups. This is really phenomenal for us to see. We'll get the statistical analysis on this shortly, but really great early indicator. Something new here, a new subgroup. Now that we made it through an academic term, the students who had, these are the first time freshmen who had a high school GPA that was less than 3.25, those students, there was 5.5% higher enrollment in the Nearpeer group. So this is our first peek at the academic impact and how students are managing. And again, this is the entire Nearpeer group versus the entire control group. So the magnitude is if all the students did it, might be even greater. And this year we're trying to drive towards 40 percentage adoption of Nearpeer at CSUN. So with that, you know, we've got a couple of minutes to go here. If there are CFOs on the call, I know that all of you get asked these questions. Show me some data and that I'm getting a return on this investment. If you take those additional students and translate that out to the tuition dollars they bring in, what the CFOs care about, but you care about your retention and show rates, but it does have tangible impact. And I think this is important because post-pandemic dollars are tougher to come by. With that, we have a video about international transfer. We'll skip that for today, but want to open it up to your questions for a few minutes for those who can stay on. And just know that we can make this impact at your university. We can launch quickly. It's easy on staff. We talked about orientation earlier. You know, the cost is really not much more than a sandwich for all your students who are invited to orientation. So we want to integrate with your best practices and make it easy for you. Tom on our team is our director of partnerships. You can reach him there. He's on the call today. But if there are any questions that came through in the chat, I can't see the chat. So if someone wants to share those for our last few minutes together, that would be terrific.
All right, I'll read these to you, Christopher. The first question is the National Freshman Motivation Report information on slide 15 the same as the National Freshman Motivation to Complete College report?
I don't know if those are two different things, but this was a study of like 100,000 first-year freshmen, first-year students across the country and across institution types. That was put out by another industry aggregator of information.
The second question is, sorry if I missed it, but how much control do students have over who sees their information? What will happen with their information when they graduate or ask to opt out? Yeah, a tremendous question, because students have complete agency within Nearpeer. They can opt in to join. They can delete their account instantly if they chose to do that. They can decide who gets to see their interest and their other connections. They have all the agency that they need. And that's one of the things that they really like about it, because it does make it unique. Also, as administrators and leaders, you have some control within the system. Behavior is very good, but if there is a problem, it's very easy for you to at least temporarily or permanently take down a student account or something that was posted. We have controls on profanities and other terms that can't be put into the system. So there's a lot there that makes it a safe and healthy environment, as David described earlier. We have another question, David. Just wanting to know if they can get the slide deck after the presentation.
Yeah, I'll work with Acro to share the slide deck, and reach out to Tom, and he can share this deck and a research brief on this as well, and our impact of belonging report, if anybody on the call wants that before we get it out via the Acro website. All right, any other questions come in, David?
That's it.
All right. Well, thanks to all who attended today, and thank you, David, for taking the time to cover this. And I of course, value the relationship and the continued work together, getting these new insights. And I look forward to seeing if these students return for the fall of 23 and continue to impact students and this new group that we're working with you on. And we'll release that data sometime soon once we have it. But we work there with students who were admitted but not yet committed to help drive yield specifically. So for another day and another webinar, we look forward to that. David, any closing comments?
Christopher, no, but thank you for that. And I think one of the real gifts for us as an institution is being able to work with Nearpeer, and I think the close collaboration and support that we've received, and more importantly, I think the promises that they made are the promises that they kept, which is a really important aspect of a strong partnership. So look forward to a continued partnership with you guys.
Thanks so much, David. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.